What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Tar Heel Illustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, for yet another episode of the UNC Football Show, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, it's UVA week for the Tar Heels noon kickoff in Scott Stadium this Saturday in Charlottesville. That game will be televised on the ACC network. Carolina currently an 8.5-point favorite over the Cavaliers on Saturday. Even more interesting, which we're going to dive into here in a little bit, historically in Charlottesville, Carolina not the greatest record, 26-26 overall. And even more interestingly, Mack Brown has not won a game there. Like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but some interesting kind of storylines going into it. And when you're looking back at some opportunities and the Virginia teams that he's faced, this has got to be one of the best opportunities he's had with the team he has and the team that Virginia has to go up there and get that first win. But AJ, like we always do, we're going to focus on we got a fun show coming up. We're going to, dive into the not the pit preview. I'm on last week mode right now. The UVA preview a little bit later on in this podcast. But right now I want to talk about just some of the game week storylines going into it, as we always do. And I think we have to start with the injury, situation that Carolina currently finds themselves in. AJ, I think that's probably been the biggest talking point from this week. For those who didn't know, or maybe you haven't heard the news, I'm sure most of you have if you're a Carolina fan. Caleb Hood, Noah Taylor, Des Evans, all out for the season. Carolina announced on Monday. So big losses on the defensive line. And obviously Caleb Hood, big loss for that running back room as he kind of grabbed that starting running back position and made it his own before getting hurt. I believe it was like his first play of the game against Pitt too. So unfortunate for him. Bryson Nesbitt, Kamon Rucker also being monitored this week. So their status as of right now still kind of interesting to see up in the air. And we'll see what happens on Saturday if they do end up playing. But like I said, AJ, those three guys out for the year, especially that Noah Taylor and Des Evans down there on the defensive line, those are big losses for a D-line group that has improved this year. It started out slow, not really being able to get enough pressure, consistent pressure down there, whether it was getting to the quarterback or, just stopping the run. And those are two really important guys. I thought Noah Taylor had a fantastic year so far, in particular the transfer from UVA. So what are your initial thoughts on, I guess, focusing on those guys? And obviously we can hit on Nesbitt and Rucker as well, because like I said, their status still up in the air for Saturday afternoon.
Well, if you include Ray Vahasek, who was formally announced as being out for the year the week before, in the last week and a half, they have lost three guys for the season that have played 4,500 snaps in their college careers combined.
Yeah, it's big losses, man.
And three starters up front. And this is for a defense that's had quite a bit of trouble. Now, I know that they have shown improvement. Part of that is because they haven't played great offenses at times here lately. Part of it is because they are getting better. And one of the areas that they have struggled in is A, generating a conventional pass rush, and B, stopping the run consistently. So you take out your nose guard, who graded out the best on the team and make it as fits along the defensive line. And then you take out, arguably your two best pass rushers. Now, Des Evans hadn't gotten to the quarterback yet this year, but he had about 8 hurries, I think it was. And he's supposed to be a guy that at some point the light was going to go on. He was going to start getting to quarterbacks more often. I think that they would tell you that Noah Taylor was their best pass rusher.
Agreed.
So that's going to be an area moving forward that will be interesting to see what they're able to get. Now, Kamon Rucker actually played a little bit of jack in the Pittsburgh game, and he's a playmaker. He's graded out highest over the season on defense, and his season grade is in the mid-80s from PFF. He's just a playmaker. So often when a big play is made on defense, he's either right there or he's sort of part of it. So it'll be interesting to see if he is the second jack behind Chris Collins now, as opposed to Malachi Hamrick, the true freshman who's got playmaking ability, but he's a true freshman. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to monitor moving forward. And then with the defensive front, this means Travis Shaw is going to get more reps. He hasn't played a ton, I think around 86 snaps this season, but it's time to show up and eat up blockers. That's pretty much his job. He didn't have to make plays. He didn't have to move a lot. All he has to do is occupy blockers. And it's funny because we talked to Miles Murphy on Tuesday evening over at the Keenan Football Center, and he was asked, what is it about Travis that that just stands out, that pops, that impresses you, that he does consistently. And he said nobody can block him. They try to double team him in practice and they can't block him. So now he's going to have an opportunity, I think, to go from 11, 12, 13 snaps a game into the 22 to 25 range. I think they're going to make up for some of these snaps by divvying it up a little bit more. And that's also important at the interior of the line, because I think they're going to move Ritzy out to the rush end now. He got a lot of work there in the spring, a lot in August during fall camp. He's athletic enough. He's bigger than Des Evans from a thickness standpoint, but he's pretty athletic. He's a better football player. And maybe he'll have a lot of success there. We'll have to wait and see, but he's probably going to get a lot of reps over there as well. So a group that was very, very deep in August has thinned out quite a bit. Now, it does help that Miles Murphy's getting a little healthier as well. He had a badly sprained ankle at Georgia State. He was actually told not to play against Virginia Tech and Notre Dame, but he went ahead and played anyway. Didn't play a lot, but he played. And we're going to see some KBJ and perhaps even some Keyshawn Silver. Yeah. So a lot of fans that have been clamoring to see some of these guys, you're going to see them now. They have no choice to play them. It's November. Travis Shaw has been there for almost a year. So it's time to be a big-time college football player and make stuff happen.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think Max said it on Monday, but it's the time now where your recruiting really steps up, because you've got guys injured on that defensive line. If you've been recruiting well over the last few years, you should have guys that can kind of step up there and maybe not be as good. I mean, it's hard to step in for a guy like Noah Taylor, who's played as much college football as he has. He was having a really good year. You're not going to step up and just some young guy's going to step up and just take over his role and produce like he was doing. It's not necessarily something you'd expect, but you're relying on young guys now to step in, play more than they've been, and play more important roles than they've been called to play so far this season, which can hurt you in the short term, which is obviously what we're focusing on here. We're focusing on this season, but could and should be a benefit moving down the line, because you're now putting young guys in who are getting more valuable ACC Coastal Division reps in a situation where Carolina's in a great position, which we'll talk about in a second, to potentially clinch the ACC Coastal here over the next few weeks. So I think it's a good opportunity, but it's got to be a little bit of concern. I know the coaching staff did a pretty good job of saying, it's next man up kind of thing, but there's no way it's not a concern when you just look at the sheer amount of depth, particularly on the defensive line. And like you said, the sheer amount of experience that the Tar Heels are losing down there. I mean, it's got to be something they're slightly worried about.
But they do have Chris Collins at the jack spot. This is his 5th year in the program. He's a really smart kid. Much of the guys said that he's a locker room favorite, and they said he is a leader. He is a voice they have been hearing already. Here's a guy you want to talk. We've talked a lot about some dudes that have great attitudes in this team. Certainly Elijah Green is a wonderful example of that.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Collins would have been the starter if Noah Taylor doesn't transfer in. And instead of distancing himself from Taylor, not really accepting him or embracing him, he and Noah hit it off really, really well early on. Now, they knew each other some in high school. They played against each other in high school up there in the Richmond, Virginia area. So there was some respect, and they already kind of knew a little bit about each other. So it was maybe a little easier for them to break things in. But Chris didn't look at him as a threat. He looked at him as a guy that can help them win. And that's the kind of attitude that Chris brings to the field. And some of the guys are saying that Chris is a leader. He can be that leader, because I thought that would be what they would miss the most from Noah. Because remember the Tony Grimes incident? That was Noah Taylor. And I think Noah Taylor was a very important moment for this defense to shake the tree and get rid of some of the junk that was kind of holding it back emotionally and as far as chemistry and culture and all that stuff goes. And Noah Taylor was really, really a key part of that. But you know what? Maybe the group is ready now to move forward, and what he was able to serve then served its purpose. I'm not saying they're better without him or anything like that. I'm not trying to go there at all. What I'm saying is it's good that if Noah's going to get hurt, he got hurt after all that stuff happened. I think the unit has found itself now, and his greatest service to this team was during that period and getting them to where they are now. I think as a football player, Chris can certainly handle a lot of that. He played 41 snaps against Pitt. I thought he did a really nice job setting the edge defensively, which is probably primary focus number one for Gene Chiswick's defense, is to set the edge, and it kind of keeps some stuff in, makes everything a little bit easier. So if he can have success doing that forward, then they Hamrick gets a few reps. I mean, Hamrick's been there a while now, so it's time to see where he is as a full-fledged college football player. And what's going to happen, Jacob, is they're going to benefit next year with the experience some of these guys are going to get now. So the group that goes to spring practice, a lot of these young guys that maybe would have gone to spring practice with 110 snaps or something like that, they're going to go there with a couple hundred. But a lot more stuff on film, and they're going to be much better off moving forward, because we all know 2023 might really be the year for this program. Right now, I think, is a bridge to that. So that added experience is going to make next year's team better. And let's face it, these are really talented kids. These are 4-star kids. Yeah. Shaw's a 5-star kid. So maybe they're okay this year too. They just got to let them out there, let them play, let them learn, get knocked around some, and not just be out there for 4 snaps and come off. I'd like to see Travis Shaw out there for a 10-play drive. Not that I want to see a team have a 10-play drive. I don't care one way or the other, but I'd like to see how he handles a 10-play drive, getting every snap. That would be his next step in growing up. And we may see that here either this week or at Wake Forest.
Agreed. I think Carolina, like you said, is in a lot better position now than maybe, a month ago to handle some of the attrition they've had down there because of
big time.
Yeah, some of the things that have been, it looks like, figured out down there. But we'll see. And like you said, I think they're going to have a good opportunity this weekend against a UVA offense that has struggled mightily, to say the least, to at least see what they can do and get some of those guys some reps. So, AJ, real quick, I want to talk about one more thing before we dive into the preview. Another storyline kind of coming from this week. Still the same old message from the Tar Heels and Mack Brown. It's one game at a time. It's blinders. I really, when I think about Carolina football right now, I picture having some horse blinders on. They're not focusing on the outside noise, the rankings, the chatter, coastal division race. They're just taking it one game at a time, because that's really all that matters. And AJ, this is a big game Saturday. A win Saturday would clinch a tie for the division crown for North Carolina, and losses by second place teams Duke and Miami would ensure the Tar Heels' first division title since 2015. So it's a big game this weekend. It's against a UVA team that's struggling, but it's like we've talked about a little bit on here. It's also a place that Carolina history of in recent years has been good, but to Mack Brown and just overall past at Carolina, it's been a place that Carolina struggled to pick up wins at in its history. So yeah, I think that's another thing I want to hit on with you. It just seems like this team is focused. Seems like they've got the right attitude. They've been getting the right messages from the coaching staff. And more importantly, your coaching staff can tell you whatever the heck they want to tell you. But if you're not bought in 100% to what the message is being told to you, which it seems like this North Carolina team is, I mean, just look back 12 months ago, it was a team that wasn't in a lot of ways. Seems like this team's bought in a lot more. And I think that's a big positive with you. Like I said, Carolina's in a really good position right now. They can just stay focus on just winning games 1 week at a time. They're going to find themselves Coastal Division chance before they know it.
Well, they're 17th in the CFP, and Mack has dismissed the opinion polls up to this point. He still dismisses AP and coaches poll, but the CFP is it's a statement about your resume and who you are at this moment in time. And the irony, it's the same ranking as the AP.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
So, the AP voters kind of have an idea what, they're all sports writers and stuff. They have some knowledge. Mm-hmm. I think it's a pretty fair spot for the team. And I do like the way Mack has handled it. He said, look, you appreciate it. This is because you guys have done good things. But he also said, now it's November. This is when good teams just stay where they are and great teams take a step forward. So what are you going to be? They have an opportunity in their last 4 games. 2 of them are against teams that are in the CFP top 25. One of them is on the road against a nemesis they can never beat. And the other one is Georgia Tech, a club that clobbered them last year. So they have a lot to still prove. They have a lot to still achieve. But I still think this team is very much in a developmental stage. They know who they are, but they're still developing. I think they have a chance to get better this weekend in Charlottesville and take that to Winston-Salem and get better that night as well. And if they do that and they get better against Georgia Tech and beat them, and then they get better against State and beat them, and they're sitting there at 11-1 going to Charlotte to take on Clemson, then they have a chance to get better in that game as well, win or lose. So I still think the mindset is the right one. Just get better every week, because you can't stagnate. If you stagnate, you lose. And upsets of mammoth proportions happen in college football. Bizarre scores happen. For any Carolina fan watching this thinking it's going to be a cakewalk this week, It could be, but that's a foolish way to look at this game because they're going up against a really good defense and they're going to a place the program hasn't had a lot of success. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. But I like the disposition of the team. I like the way they're handling the CFP, the attention. We talked to Drake Tuesday night for a while about all the attention he's getting. And, he's as tunnel visioned as they get. And he's as tunnel vision as they come. And he really does block the stuff out. He knows it's there. He's on Twitter selling Drake-made T-shirts and sweatshirts later in the night. So he's aware. He knows he's leading the nation in passing. He knows he leads the nation in touchdown passes, but he's all about the team. It's not hokey. It's legitimate. It's who the guy is, and it's how he's wired. And I think that that's the competitive nature. A lot of great athletes, great players, highly successful athletes know they are, but they don't dwell on it because they're never satisfied. And that's where the Brady stuff comes from. The MJ stuff comes from. You look at great baseball players throughout time, they've been like that. He has that in him. So what? I lead the nation in passing on November 1st. Big deal.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. Where am I going to be in mid-December, late December, January? Where's the team going to be? He knows for the team to win, he has to be really good. So he's not going to settle on anything. So because of that, I don't think the team is settling on anything. And as you and I have discussed, Jacob, they're 7-1, and they know that there are a lot of boxes they still have to check. So they're kind of kept in their place. There's really no room for them to just kind of pound their chests and gloat because there's not a lot to gloat about because they could be so much better than they've been. And they know that. So there is no real degree of satisfaction right now. And I think that that's healthy. And I think that that's culture. And that begins at the top with their head coach and the rest of his staff.
Yeah, agreed. I think Carolina is a program, and especially this year's team's in a really positive place right now. But like you said, all it takes is one weekend not showing up. You can get beat in college football. It doesn't matter who you're playing. It doesn't matter what their record is or how they've been this year. Just go look at all the scores around the country. Week after week, there's constantly teams getting upset, conference play or non-conference. It doesn't matter. So Carolina definitely has to show up against a UVA team because, like I said, I think it is going to be a tricky game. AJ, let's move on to the preview here in a second. Before we do that, though, I want to give a shout-out to our sponsor. They've been sponsoring all our UNC football shows that we've done so far, and that's myperfectfranchise.net. If you've been following along, you guys know who they are, you know what they're about, and you know that we absolutely love them. So guys, if you're looking to diversify, looking to leave the corporate rat race, gain control of your income and schedule, what about having unlimited PTO and the ability to create your own income and wealth? Well, guys, look no further than myperfectfranchise.net. Andy Ludicky, long-term Rivals member, diehard college football fan, and franchise veteran, most importantly, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his career. So using his experience, which he has a ton of, and using his expertise, which he has a ton of, he helps others find their American dream through a thorough and free consultation process. So guys, if you're out there, you see all these franchises popping up all over the place, doesn't matter where you live, they're there. And you thought about, hey, how do I open one? How do I go about looking into opening one and owning my own franchise, running my own franchise? Guys, you can do that with myperfectfranchise.net. So call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. And again, remember, it's 100% free consultation. So what do you really have to lose? And if you do talk to him, as we always say, I love to end it with this, AJ, massive Mack Brown fan, huge Mack Brown fan.
Yeah.
So make sure if you talk to him, you let him know that TarHeelIllustrated.com sent you, and make sure you talk a little bit of Mack with you, because I'm sure you probably won't be able to get him off the phone if you start talking a little Mack. So again, guys, myperfectfranchise.net, link is in the description below. Big shout out to Andy. Absolutely love partnering with them and looking forward to doing it in the future.
That too. Let me just add something on that, because this is one of the things I like, and one of the things I love about what Andy does. He doesn't get paid unless you get put into a franchise.
Yeah.
So, he'll work with you and work with you and work with you. If you don't get put into a franchise, he doesn't make any money. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you have to pay to have him show you.
Yeah.
He'll work with you. So I think that's one of the great things about what he does.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point, AJ. Like I said, he's a great guy. And if you're really something you're interested in, he'll help you get on that path and help you figure out how you can get into it as well. myperfectfranchise.net, link is in the description below. All right, AJ, let's dive into the Cavaliers. Obviously, number 17, North Carolina, 7-1, 4-0 in ACC play. Virginia, 3-5, 1-4 in the ACC, sixth place in the Coastal right now, just in front of Virginia Tech, and they've lost 4 out of their last 5 games. Focusing on the offense a little bit, averaging 16.9 points per game and 359.9 yards per game. 10th ranked offense in the ACC right now, and number 123 nationally in scoring offense. So this is a team at that 16.9 points per game mark that has struggled mightily to put the ball in the end zone. Brennan Armstrong, a guy that no Carolina fans are familiar with from last year's game, throwing for a little over 1,800 yards, 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and ran for 353 yards too. Funny enough, going into this game, because starting running back Paris Jones is likely not going to be available on Saturday, Brennan Armstrong right behind him, and he will be the leading rusher for the Cavaliers going into this game. So an offense it's just struggled. There's no other ways to look at it, especially compared to the offense that they had under Bronco Mendenhall just a year ago. This is an offense that's really, really just find it difficult to put the ball in the end zone. Like I said, looking at the wide receiver group, you got 2 guys, deep threat receivers that have put up some decent yards. Leading receiver, Ketayon, I probably butchered that name. I apologize. Thompson, 53 catches for 579 yards, averaging about 11 yards per catch. You got Dontavian Wicks right behind him with 30 catches for 430 yards and 14.3 yards per catch. So 2 big play receivers right there that, if you're not careful, can put some big chunks of yardage up on you quickly. Defensively, AJ, though, it's a different story, man. 5th best defense.
By the way, Billy Kemp is really good too. He's just had a tough year. All those guys are NFL.
Yeah, they've got some NFL guys on that side of the ball. There's no doubt about it at all. Defensively,
this year would not give any indication of that, though.
Yeah, just haven't been able to put it together this year for whatever reason. 5th best defense in the ACC, allowing just 340.6 yards per game and just 21.5 points per game. So this is a solid defense, a defense that makes stops and has been good this year. Linebacker Nick Jackson is where it starts, man. Leads the team with 84 tackles. And is also second on the team in sacks with 4 sacks on the year. He's a beast. He gets it done for him, and he's all over the place for the Hoos. And defensive lineman Aaron Famui leads the team in sacks with 4.5. So it's really, like I said, AJ, I'm going to keep harping on it because it's pretty simple with UVA. It's a tale of 2 sides of the ball. The offense has struggled mightily. They have not been able to put up points. One of the worst teams in scoring offense in the country. It's just a statistical fact. And they've struggled. And then defensively, they've got a good defense, a defense that's made stops, that's been able to hold teams to just basically 22 points per game, 340 yards per game. That's 122 more yards than Carolina allows per game. So this is a good defense. So when I look at this team, I think it's about Carolina offensively. I think Carolina defensively has to play well. They can't go up to Charlottesville and give up 31 points. They just can't do that. They can't give up anything like that when you look at what UVA is averaging on the season. But it's going to be a test for Carolina's offense. Now, I personally think Carolina's offense can score with just about anybody in the country. I think most Carolina fans would agree with that from what we've seen this year. But it's going to be really important. The defense goes up there, plays a solid game. If the offense doesn't have any hiccups, doesn't come out flat, doesn't come out overlooking UVA for whatever reason, I think both sides of the ball for Carolina are going to have to be effective on Saturday if Carolina wants to win this ball game.
No doubt. There's a lot of things that Tar Heels must do well to win this game. It's not a gimme.
No, by
no
means.
Anyone thinks it's a gimme, they may end up winning with a lopsided victory, and that doesn't mean that thinking it would be a lopsided victory makes you right going in, because I don't think there's any way to predict college football these days, especially ACC games.
Yeah, Jesus.
But there are a lot of things that this team has to show this week. It has to show in its growth and its maturity and all the things that Mack is saying about them being player-led and everything else. This is where it shows itself. They're going to get up for a big game, but they got to get up for this one. To me, the biggest test is going out there at 10:30 in the morning, doing warm-ups in Charlottesville, kickoff at noon. I know that this is historically a rivalry. I don't think it's going to be a huge crowd. They've had terrible crowds up there this year because it's been a very difficult year and not a fun team to watch, to be perfectly honest. And so I don't think that there'll be a great crowd in the stands.
Yeah.
So Carolina's going to have to generate its own energy, and they're going to play a team that is going to be ready to go. It's going to be a very good big game. They're going to treat this game like it's enormous, and they will be ready to play. They got a defense that can pop and a defense that can get Carolina out of sorts. And if that happens, then that could set the table for other things occurring. I asked Mack Wednesday morning, sort of along the lines about this is a test for the maturity of the team. He said, look, if you're not ready to play, that means you commit penalties, you turn the ball over, you have special teams issues, and that's how you lose games. And if they aren't ready to play, they could have a bunch of penalties. They could have some turnovers, and they could have breakdowns in special teams. So if that happens and UVA is able to pop Carolina's offense and sort of throw them off some, that sets up perfectly for Virginia to win this game.
Yeah.
So, and plus, let's face it, Brennan Armstrong threw for 554 yards against Carolina last year. These guys, Thomas and Wicks and Kemp, those guys they're NFL dudes.
No
Armstrong's
doubt.
an NFL dude. Disregard the stats this year. Tony Elliott came in and changed the offense. And some people I talked to that cover team said it's stupid that he changed the offense. And that's why they've struggled so much. There have been a lot of issues up there. There hasn't been tremendous harmony, and some of the receivers are frustrated and dropping passes. Well, maybe Saturday's the day that they don't drop those passes. They're dialed in because it's Carolina. They're dialed in because even though he's injured, Noah Taylor's going back up there. He's going to be a captain for Carolina. Mm-hmm. So they're going to get whatever UVA has left, whatever Tony Elliott and his staff could squeeze out of this team, they're going to be able to squeeze it out of them this Saturday for a noon kick at home in front of a half-empty stadium with a team that they don't like coming in. So the Tar Heels need to be ready to meet that. And I think that's going to be their number one challenge. The number two challenge is going to be the offense dealing with the very good defense. These numbers are real. UVA has not given up offensive touchdown in its last two games. Both of its opponents, Georgia Tech and Miami, combined for 474 yards in those two games. And they combined to go 11 for 37 on third downs.
It's good defense.
So this is going to be a test. Mm-hmm. If Carolina's offense can't score, then if you have those other breakdowns, suddenly that's how upsets happen. Mm-hmm. The defense going up against UVA's offense is a different story. UVA's offense has been awful. They were 0 for 15 on third down at Illinois. I think Armstrong threw for almost 4,500 yards last year, 31 touchdowns. He's at 1,800 yards and 6 touchdowns right now. And the offense has just been blowing up, and it's a big time source of frustration for people up there. And there could be a deep meaning there. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the off season? But I've heard some people talk about how it may not, if it's not working, who knows what they'll do at UVA. But the team that you guys saw in Atlanta, from an offensive standpoint, what you saw against Miami last week, I think you're going to see a better version of all of that against Carolina, because this is they have 2 big games remaining, that one at Virginia Tech, and they're going to be ready to play. So the Tar Heels are going to be tested. And another thing, I know I'm going long-winded here, the running back situation at Carolina is going to be interesting with Caleb Hood out. We didn't really get into that. We talked about the injuries, but Mack said Wednesday morning, they've kind of been going with whoever's hot or who fits all along anyway. So they're going to continue to do that. They have the speed guy in Elijah Green. They have the more power guy in Omarion. They have the older guy who could pass protect in DJ, although Elijah did a good job in pass protection against Pittsburgh. And they really want to find ways to get Pettaway the ball because he could be a playmaker. In fact, they have him returning kicks now as well. So you probably see packages for all 4. I think that's probably they wanted 2 to separate, but I think you're going to see packages for all 4 moving forward, which long-term will probably be the best thing. You need to get those guys in the field and whatever they do this year, have them carry that competition into the spring and summer and have it sort itself out over time.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that position group kind of develops throughout the rest of the year. But like you said, a lot of options down there. So it's not like Carolina's short on talent and short on even experience in some ways. AJ, last thing before we go to prediction time, we got to talk about it. I mean, I don't know if you believe in curses. I'm not really a huge curse guy. But looking at Mack Brown's record up there, hasn't won a game in Charlottesville. Carolina just 26-26 overall in Charlottesville. I know they've had recent success, has been a little bit better up there, but still it's a place Carolina's historically really struggled at. But for me, the Mack Brown stat is wild. I know we got to take it with a pinch of salt because when Mack Brown was here, his first go around in Charlottesville, UVA had some really good football teams, not much so in recent years when he came back, but still, it's still something that he hasn't been able to pick up a win yet. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know your first ever college football game you covered was up in Charlottesville back in, was it 96, 97, 96?
96.
So, it's there's some interesting storylines. And like I said, even going back a little bit for you, you were there when, with that first game. So what are your thoughts on the curse of Mack Brown and the Who's?
Well, that was that game in November of 96. Carolina was 6th in the country when they went in to Charlottesville. That's the first time I ever wore a credential.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever covered anything in my life. And
not a bad game to cover, right?
Yeah, and I covered what I think can be considered as the biggest loss in Carolina history in many respects, especially because they had the 17-3 lead. And Mack has said since, maybe just run the ball and kick a field goal 20-3, and that's probably enough. But Keldorf throws the interception. Octavius Barnes later admitted he ran the wrong route. Antoine Harris, who's from Raleigh, picked it off, ran 100 yards back for a touchdown. The play, I remember that play very vividly. I also remember the Dre Bly pick six. You can find it on YouTube. He danced like the last 30 yards in the zone. It was vintage Dre Bly.
Might get thrown out of the game if you do that now. Get 16 penalty flags thrown at you.
Absolutely. But that was the first thing I ever covered. And I walked away from that saying, I think I'm going to do this again.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And here I am 26 years later, and I'm still doing it. So
got the bug.
The curse, you go into places like Baton Rouge, or you go into places like Tuscaloosa or Columbus or Ann Arbor, and you lose a lot. It's not really a curse because you're playing really good teams. When Mack was at Carolina the first time, UVA was really good. That 1990 team was ranked number 1 in the country and went to the Sugar Bowl. George Welsh was a fantastic coach. He did a good job at Navy, and he's a legendary. He's one of the best football coaches in ACC history, without a doubt. His teams were physical. They could run the ball. They played D. They always had great linebackers. The Wally Rayners of the world. And what's interesting is the following year, and Mack brought this up the other day. He was asked about that game. And he said, well, y'all asked me about that, but you never asked me about 97. Okay. What happened in 97? The next year in Chapel Hill, UVA goes up 20-3. And Carolina scores 45 unanswered points to close them out. It was an explosion. Dre had another pick six in that game. That was also the game that some people might remember. ACC official Jim Knight had a heart attack on the field.
I remember you telling me about that.
Before he left the field, they thought he may have been dead. And the hospital's right there behind the home side. He goes to the hospital. If the hospital was further away, maybe he would have died. And he was revived. And I was actually at the game. I didn't cover it, but I was at the game. One of my friends wanted to go down. One of my friends was a huge UVA fan, wanted to go down. I was living in Virginia at the time, wanted to go down and see the game. And I remember when they announced early in the third quarter that Jim Knight would be okay. It was the loudest non-team ovation, team-related ovation I've ever heard at an athletic event in my life.
I can imagine.
And it was really, really cool. So I don't believe in curses. I just think that they lost to really, really good teams. They found some weird ways to win with some botched punts. And then 2 years ago during the COVID year, I mean, they gave up 41 points to a team they shouldn't have given up 41 points to, and they totally bungled a fourth down defensive situation. So they should end that quote unquote curse this year. And 26-26 all time is not bad on the road against somebody, but I would go back to like 1980 and see, okay, or 79, 1980 and see, okay, or when George Welsh got there, what has Carolina been in Charlottesville then since? It's not been very good. They were pretty good before, because UVA was a mess in football before George Welsh got there. They were one of the worst programs in the country for decades, but they were really good under Welsh.
They had a streak there, early, mid to early 2010s, lower than that too, where they had one up there, and I forgot how many consecutive games it was, but there was a streak at one point. I
think it dated back to 79. I think they lost at 81.
So crazy
lost,
like that,
lost every time there until I think they beat them on a Thursday night up there in 2008 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think Dwight Jones had like 480 catches that night.
Yep, I remember that game. There was something that happened late in that game too, if I remember correctly, where I forgot what it was, but somebody was going to set a record for something, and I think the backup quarterback came in, and like all they had to do was like throw a screen pass for him to set the record. I don't remember if it was a receiver or something like that. He like threw it into the ground. I'll never forget that play because I was watching that game on TV, and I'll just never forget that because it was like the most gimme record you could set, and it was just like just the pitch and catch gone wrong with, up.
Yeah, they won there in 16 with Trubisky. He had a really good, Elijah Hood had a really good game that game. He had 140 yards. That was one of his best games in 2016. I think that was the week he got engaged too.
Yeah.
So he was celebrating that with a big performance. And everyone was after the game was asking him questions about the engagement more than his performance, I guess. So
it's about
they should end that. There's no curse. They lost a really good team.
I had to throw it out there because I knew it was something.
And then when they lost to UVA teams that weren't really good, it's not like Carolina's been setting the world on fire.
That's a fair point as well. That's a heck of a point right there too.
I mean, if the Tar Heels win 2 more games, it'll be their second most wins in a season since Mack left.
Yeah, it's true, man. It's shaping up to be a really nice year. And like I said, you could break the curse this weekend. You could also clinch a tie of the Coastal Division crown too. So it wouldn't be a pretty.
Yeah, they have a 2-game lead over Miami and Duke, and they have a 3-game lead over Georgia Tech, but they still play Georgia Tech.
Yep.
So technically, if Tech loses 1 more, they're out. And Miami and Duke lose 1 more, they're out as long as Carolina wins 1 more. So Carolina,
they're sitting pretty.
I can't. Yeah, there's no way Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, any one of those 3 are going to run the table the rest of the way.
No, I don't see that happening. I think that's why that Pitt game was so important, because Carolina was already kind of in the driver's seat. It wasn't like losing to Pitt and you're like, oh God, they got to do all these things now to win the division. But winning that game in particular really, really put them in a really nice position, especially when you look at who they've got coming up with, in particular, Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech, 2 very winnable games. So Wake Forest is going to be tough. State at home is always going to be tough too, but you got some very winnable games. You expect Carolina to go ahead and wrap it up here over the next, few weeks. So we'll see what happens.
You asked about the message that Mack was and how they're handling the CFP stuff. I really like the message Mack is giving them about the Coastal. They're not talking about the Coastal.
No, I think it's
and I think one of the reasons is, as much as winning the Coastal be an accomplishment for this program, because they don't do it a lot. They won it in 15 and they tied for it with 2 other teams in 12, and they were ineligible for the postseason that year. That was Larry's first year. But I think that they're thinking bigger down the road. Winning the Coastal is not much. They are well positioned now to go back to the Orange Bowl. But if they lose 2 out of their next 4, they're not going to the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
So the much bigger fish is down the road. And who knows? I mean, who knows what they're going to look like when they get to Charlotte?
Yeah.
And, Clemson hasn't dominated everybody. I think that would be an interesting matchup.
I think it would be too. I think that would be a fantastic game. And I think, especially when you look at Carolina offensively, I think defensively, Carolina's we'll talk about this one later when it gets there, but I think it'd be a very interesting matchup in terms of an offensive shootout is I think what it would ultimately
be. They have to prove something this weekend. Matt keeps talking about them being a player-led team. He keeps talking about the growth and all that stuff. They've recruited very well. They're replacing some older guys getting hurt with very young, highly recruited, talented kids. So we'll see really where the program is. And in order for the program to show it has taken all of those steps forward, they have to win this weekend, because they historically lose those what the heck games. They had one last year in Atlanta, which made no sense. They had the one in Tallahassee the year before that, and so on. So this, to me, would size up as a what the heck game. I think it's a potential what the heck game, because we're still watching this thing take form. They're in the oven, but they're nowhere near being cooked. You don't want to open the oven to look at them and have it screw up the cooking, because they're still in mid-cooked form. So it's going to be a while. It smells good. It kind of looks good from a distance.
You want to take a bite out of it, but it's not.
But you got to let it get. You got to be patient. You got to trust the process, right? And let it sort of work itself out and finish cooking. Wait for the timer to go off. The timer hadn't gone off yet. So leave the door closed and let them continue to become who they're going to become. And this weekend is a test in that process. No doubt about it. Prediction time, just before we wrap this one up, I'm saying 41-24 North Carolina. I don't think they'll have any problem scoring against what is a good UVA defense. Like I said, I put Carolina's offense up against anybody really, especially with how they've looked over the last few games and how fantastic Drake May's been. Defensively, I think Carolina will give up points. 24 points to this Carolina defense. I know when you're looking at a UVA team that's only averaging about 17 per game, you'll be a little bit disappointed with that. But I think on the other flip side, if you tell any Carolina fan that any game this year, they're going to give up 24 points, they're like, yeah, we'll take it. That'll probably be a win for us when you look at how good the offense is. So I'm saying 41-24. I think it'll be tight for a little bit, but I think Carolina, maybe similar to what we saw against Pitt,
kind of pulls away a little bit, especially in that third quarter, early fourth quarter, and it ends up being maybe a little bit more comfortable than the scoreline looks. So I'm saying 41-24. What's your prediction, AJ?
Similar. I'm looking at 37-17. I don't think they give up 24 points to this offense.
Yeah, it's not great.
Unless it's late points after they have a big lead or something like that. This defense needs to keep showing it's making progress. And by doing so, if they give up 20 points, Mack say, hey, we only give up 20 points in an ACC game, but I'm going to judge who they're going up against. They're facing a couple of teams here in the next few weeks that they should shut down because a lot of people shut them down. Georgia Tech's got terrible offense. Virginia's got terrible offense. So Carolina can't let them produce above what they've been producing if they want to show that they're making progress. Mm-hmm. Now, they have some new roles this week, some enhanced roles for certain guys. So that will be part of their test as well. But it's also a really good game for some of these guys to absorb a lot more reps because they're going up against a club that hasn't had any success. Virginia scored 20 points once against an FBS team. And they lost that game at Syracuse. Now they almost beat Syracuse, but they still lost. And Carolina, I think it's got to be 17 or under, and the total yardage can't be in the 400s. They got to be in the 360, 370 or less. I think those things are important because what we do. We judge the team. We gauge the team. We look at progress. We're not just, hey, whether they win or lose. There's a lot of things that go into it. And this is one of those games where you don't want to show that you're regressing in certain areas. Mm-hmm. Even though it may not look on the scoreboard, does it look at it in other areas? Look like that in other areas. So they need to have a really good performance. And if it's a dominant performance, even better. Yeah,
agreed. Like I said, I think they'll win. I think they'll be able to put some nice stuff together at UVA, even despite some of the injuries on the defense and even at the O-line. We'll see who ends up playing because you miss a guy like Kamon Rucker who might not play. That's another big loss for the defensive line. So there's going to be some storylines going into it that's going to be interesting to pay attention to and some adversity that Carolina is going to face having to replace some of those guys on the D-line. How do they bounce back? How do they recover? And can they get some of these younger guys who haven't played as much to come in and not skip a beat? Like I said, great opportunity and not a bad game to be tossed into if you haven't played a lot this year against a pretty anemic UVA offense. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. AJ will be up there. I believe Kevin's going to be up there as well for the game. So, we'll have two guys from THI up there. Make sure you keep it locked to TarHillIllustrated.com for all your coverage leading up to the game, all your coverage during the game, and obviously all your coverage after the game. We'll be posting all our press conferences, 3 things, and some other videos on our YouTube channel as well. That is Tar Heel Illustrated. AJ, enjoyed it, man. Always a pleasure coming on here and talking a little Carolina football with you. Yet another episode of the UNC Football Show. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you know every single time we upload. And we do upload a lot. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.